You are 19 years old. You can feel the rope cutting into your wrists. The cell stinks of something that isn't exactly mold. It's rot. Human rot. In just the last 2 years, you accomplished what kings fail to do. You raised a nation up. You cracked siege lines that seasoned strategists swore could never fall. English commanders have jolted awake in the night, your name echoing through their dreams. And still they caught you. Your head has been shaved bare. The cold air bites your scalp as if thousands of needles are stabbing at once. They paraded you through that disgrace as if it were a ceremony turned inside out, stripping you down layer by layer. Your armor is gone. Your voice no longer carries weight. When you speak, the guards don't even react. Today, you signed a document. The words blur together now, but the shape of their meaning is burned into you. Deny your saints. The voices are demons. The visions that redirected history mere hallucinations. The mission God placed on you. Nothing but delusion. And wear this distress. Tight, humiliating choking. A garment meant to turn you back into an object instead of fighter. You believed you were saving your life. What you truly signed was a flawless snare. And the most vicious part is that they designed it so you would step into it willingly. This is a story of how Joan of Arc was legally destroyed. How the most advanced legal system of the medieval world was sharpened and aimed at a teenage girl who never realized she was entering a cage with no exit. This isn't merely about a trial. It's about the methodical dismantling of a human being using law as the instrument. And what happened to her in 1431 is not confined to the past. It still happens now. If you believe history deserves to be told accurately, stay with me because this is a story someone tried very hard to erase. Let's go back to 1429. You have to understand who Joan was before they broke her, because that's the only way to grasp how they did it. France is dying. Not figuratively, literally. The 100 Years' War has been grinding on for over a century. Think about that. 100 years of a nation bleeding, while the English take territory piece by piece, fortress by fortress. The South is English. The North is English. The coastline is English. Your king sits in a palace at Bourges, uncrowned, watching his realm shrivel like a body left under the sun. The war isn't just draining gold anymore. It has drained belief. Military leaders are convinced the English cannot be defeated. Nobles are cutting quiet deals with the enemy. Parents are raising their children to believe a French victory is nothing more than a bedtime. This is no longer a war. It's an occupation wearing a war's disguise. Then in January 1429, a girl walks into the dwarf's court. She comes from Domi, a village so insignificant that most educated men in France couldn't locate it on a map. She cannot read. She has never wielded a sword. Her name is Joan, and she tells Charles that God sent her to save France. Most dismiss her as mad, but she isn't insane. She's something more dangerous. She's certain. She tells the dwarf precisely what he needs to hear. That God has not abandoned France, that the English will be expelled, that all this suffering has meaning, and he allows her to ride with his armies. What follows shatters every rule of medieval warfare. Joan arrives at the siege of Orleans, the most critical stronghold still under English control. For months, the English have held it with barely 5,000 men, experienced, hardened soldiers. The French have hurled everything they have oar on and failed again and again, like arrows snapping against stone. Then Joan appears and something shifts. It isn't that she fights with superior tactics. It's that the soldiers believe in a different outcome. When she rides toward the walls, they follow, not because she issues commands, but because something about her presence says this will succeed. And somehow, impossibly, it does. Orleans falls. The English commander is captured. The unthinkable becomes real. One victory follows another and then another. In May 1429, Joan stands beside Charles as he is crowned King of France at Reims. She is in armor. The crowd roars. This is no longer just a sacred ceremony. It's confirmation. A 19-year-old peasant girl has rewritten the boundaries of what can happen. She has shown an entire nation that the English are not unstoppable. She has returned something everyone thought was gone forever: hope. By the summer of 1429, Joan of Arc is the most powerful figure in France. Not officially on paper, Charles is king. But everyone understands reality. The girl who hears saints is the reason France is still alive. The English see this as well, and they begin planning not to defeat her on the battlefield. She's already proven they can't. She's blessed. Or, if you prefer, she carries luck that borders on the impossible. No, they will destroy her in court. Because there is one place where Joan's divine mission has no protection inside the machinery of theology and law. In May 1430, Joan is leading troops at Compiègne, a small town near the border separating French and Burgundian territory. The Burgundians are technically French nobles, but since the Treaty of Troyes, they've sided with England. They play both sides, and everyone knows it. During a skirmish, a Burgundian soldier seizes Joan. It's almost ordinary. One moment she's on horseback urging men forward. The next she's pulled down, encircled, taken captive. It should have ended there. A prisoner of war ransomed, exchanged, or released. But it didn't. Instead, the Burgundians sold her to the English for 10,000 LRA. The price of a saint, the cost of a woman who had single-handedly altered the course of European warfare. To put that number in perspective, it could sustain a family for 200 years. This wasn't a ransom. It was a sale, a transaction. The English weren't buying a girl. They were purchasing an icon they needed erased. And here's the crucial point. Joan is no longer valuable because she's a military threat. She's valuable because she represents something. She is proof that God favors France. Living evidence that the English occupation can be broken if they can prove she's a fraud. If her voices are demonic, her visions delusional, her faith witchcraft, then they won't have just eliminated a soldier. They will have destroyed an idea, and they will make her testify against herself. They have forced her to undo herself using her own words. In January 1431, Joan is brought to Rouen, the English stronghold and the administrative heart of English-occupied France. What follows is presented as a religious inquiry, an ecclesiastical court, bishops and theologians, canon law and scripture. On the surface, it looks legitimate. In reality, it is a staged proceeding. Every detail is controlled. Joan is kept in chains, not in a convent under the watch of nuns as church law demands, but inside a military fortress guarded day and night by 5 English soldiers. The courtroom is packed with judges loyal to England. The prosecutor works hand in glove with English military leadership. The men assigned to defend her are judges pretending to be advocates arguing against her instead of protecting her. From the start, the goal is clear: her destruction. There are 70 sessions, 70 separate hearings spread across months. They wear her down relentlessly. The sharpest theological minds in France against a 19-year-old girl who cannot read or write. She has no lawyer, no counselor, no ally. She stands alone, and yet she is winning. She will never persuade these judges, but she is winning in a way that matters more. She is winning in the arena of reason. When they ask whether she knows she is in God's grace, a classic theological snare designed so that any answer condemns her, she gives one of the most flawless replies ever recorded. If I am not, may God place me there. And if I am, may God keep me there. They ask whether God hates the English. She responds, of God's love or hatred for the English, I know nothing. But I do know this: they will all be driven from France except those who die here. It isn't rebellious. It isn't reckless. It is precise. She is outthinking men who spend decades in universities. She throws scripture back at theologians. Every trap they lay, she deflects. When they threaten her with torture, they show her the tools, the rack, the strappo, devices meant to tear joints apart while keeping the victim alive long enough to suffer. She looks at them and says, truly, if you were to pull my limbs from my body and separate my soul from it, I would tell you nothing more. Then she adds a part that matters most. And if I did say anything, I would later say that you forced me to say it. She is telling them that confessions gained through torture are meaningless. She understands legal procedure better than her judges. She knows they can destroy her body, but her testimony would forever be tainted. And so they retreat. Torture is off the table. They change strategy. If theology won't break her and pain won't silence her, they will use fear and exhaustion. She is going to die, but not yet. Not before she signed something. May 24,431. You are pulled from your cell one last time. You don't know it's the last, but your body senses a difference. There is finality in the way the guards grip you. You are taken to the cemetery of Santoon, a public square. Hundreds are already there. No thousands. Word is spread. This is the day Joan burns. A scaffold stands in the square, with two preachers atop it. Bishop Pierre Coshan is present, the architect of the trial, the man who has guided every step of your undoing. He is pro-English, ambitious. For years, he has sought the Archbishopric of Rouen. The English have made the bargain clear. Condemn Joan, and the title is yours. He is about to deliver a final sermon, branding you a heretic, a witch, a threat to Christendom. But first, they offer you a choice. A notary steps forward with a document. It is explained at least. A shortened version is read aloud. You will deny your visions. You will admit your voices are demonic. You will agree to wear women's clothing and submit to the church. If you sign, your life will be spared. Prison instead of fire. The executioner stands beside the P. You can see the wood stacked high, dry, waiting. You are terrified, exhausted. You have been chained for months, interrogated through 70 hearings. Your body is weak, your mind is fraying, and you sign. Years later, during Joan's rehabilitation trial, held 25 years after her death, witnesses would testify that the document she actually marked was only a few lines long. They would say that the full confession later entered into the record was altered, expanded, rewritten, made far more incriminating than what she agreed to. What happened, they claimed, was a kind of ecclesiastical sleight of hand. She signed something brief, desperate. What the court preserved was something exhaustive and condemning. But none of that truly mattered. The trap was never the wording. It was the signature itself. They escort her back to prison. The crowd murmurs. Some are relieved she wasn't burned. Others are disappointed. The spectacle is finished, but not as anyone expected. She is going to live condemned, but alive. K1 delivers his sermon anyway, completing the performance. He denounces her from the scaffold even after she has surrendered. The ritual continues. She is locked back in her cell. And here, the truth turns colder than the stone around her. Joan believes she saved her life. She believes the promise was genuine. Prison instead of death. That was the bargain. But her captors never intended to honor it, because inquisitorial law has rules. Medieval church law allows mercy if a heretic confesses. Life imprisonment instead of execution. Harsh, but still life. Yet there is another category, one without mercy at all. Relapsed heresy. If a heretic recants and then returns to heresy. If they relapse, they are automatically handed over to secular authorities and they are executed. No retrial, no second opportunity. The relapse itself is the sentence of death. The English and Bishop Cozen needed her gone, but they needed her executed as a relapsed heretic. If they had killed her for the original charge, it would have exposed the bargain as a lie. It would have looked like an execution carried out in bad faith. It would have revealed the law itself as a fraud. But if she relapsed, if she returned to her so-called heresies after signing the confession, then the blame was hers alone. The law could claim perfection. Mercy had been offered. She had rejected it. So they built the trap carefully. They returned her to the same military fortress. She remained in chains, still confined with 5 English soldiers, watching her day and night. They shaved her head again as degradation. They forced her into the dress, the very dress she had been told would save her life, but which instead made her dangerously exposed. For months, Joan's men's clothing had been her armor, not symbolically, physically. During the trial, she explained that she tied her tunic and breeches together with dozens of tight cords, fastening them so securely they could not be removed without tearing the fabric apart. It was protection against assault, protection inside rooms filled with hostile men. Later, during the rehabilitation trial, witnesses confirmed that English lords had attempted to rape her in her cell. Those cords were the only barrier that stopped them. Now she was in a dress, exposed, vulnerable, alone in a room with 5 male soldiers. The taunts began, then the threats, then the insinuations, promises that if she didn't comply, worse would follow. For days passed, for days of this pressure. Then something happened that sealed her fate. And this is where the rehabilitation testimony becomes crucial. One night, the guards took her dress. They removed it completely. She was left with only the men's clothing they tossed into her cell in a sack. They forced an impossible decision on her: stand naked and defenseless before the soldiers or put on forbidden clothes. She chose safety. On May 28th, for days after her confession, for days into this arrangement, the judges came to her cell. Bishop K1 entered first. The others followed. They found her wearing men's clothing. Joan told them exactly what had happened. She explained that the dress had been taken, that she could not protect herself in women's clothing among armed men, that she had no alternative. But that wasn't all. She admitted something else. She said her voices had returned, that Saints Michael and Gabriel had come back to her, that they had condemned her for signing the abjuration, that she never should have denied them. That was the moment the trap snapped shut, by her own words spoken directly to the judges in front of witnesses. She had resumed wearing men's clothing, an explicit violation of confession, and admitted the return of her voices, a clear declaration of relapse. The verdict came instantly, unanimous, no discussion, no delay. She was declared a relapsed heretic. The promise of life had lasted exactly 4 days. Here is the truly monstrous part. Joan did not understand what had happened. She believed she was telling the truth. She believed she was explaining her circumstances. She had no idea she was writing her own death warrant into the official record. She never realized the judges had engineered a situation where she had to choose between bodily safety and survival. They removed the dress knowing she would wear the clothes. They left the soldiers knowing what fear would do. They relied on her terror. They relied on her honesty. And they turned both into weapons. The English didn't need torture. They didn't need theological victory. They only needed the right conditions. And her very human need to protect herself would finish the job. It is chilling in its precision, evil but precise. May 30th, 4031. 800 English soldiers escorted her to the old market square in Rouen. The stake stood ready, carefully prepared. The wood was seasoned to burn fast and hot. They did not want this prolonged. They wanted silence quickly. They stripped her, dressed her in a white smock, placed a paper cap on her head, marked heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolator. She asked for a crucifix, her friar-fashion one, from sticks tied together with twine. Crude, simple, but it was Christ, and it was enough. She climbed the platform. They bound her to the stake, not loosely but tightly. No falling, no escape, no movement. The executioner lit the fire. The flames caught immediately. Witnesses later said she did not scream. She did not curse her judges. She did not rage against God, England, or fate. Instead, she called out to man who had overseen her destruction. Bishop K1, I die through you. Not an accusation, a statement of fact. A final testimony spoken as the fire rose. Then she made one last request. She asked that the crucifix be held high, so it would be the final thing she saw. A simple wish. A dying woman wanted to look upon Christ as she burned. As the smoke thickened and the heat became unbearable, witnesses said her voice could still be heard above the flames. Again and again she cried out, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Not once. Over and over. The name spoke like a prayer, like a promise, like the last truth remaining in a world that had fully rotted. And thousands stood there watching. French citizens who once cheered her, who had been rescued by her, now stood watching her burn. English soldiers who had engineered her death. Priests who had condemned her. Nobles who chose silence. And then something happened. The English did not expect. An English secretary, a man involved in the trial, part of the very mechanism that sentenced her, watched as her body darkened in the flames, watched as the fire consumed the peasant girl who had threatened an empire, and he reportedly cried out in the marketplace, "We are lost. We have burned the saint." They did everything possible to ensure her legacy died with her. After her body was fully blackened, they raped back the embers and exposed the remains to the crowd. Proof that she was a woman. Proof she had not escaped. Proof that she was truly dead. Then they burned the body again and again. They continued until nothing but ash remained. What little was left was gathered and thrown into the river. They wanted to be certain that not even her dust could become a relic, that no bone could ever be venerated. Their goal was total erasure, but something the English failed to foresee was already underway. 25 years later, Joan family demanded a retrial. The Pope approved it, and during this rehabilitation trial, more than 100 witnesses were called. Priests who had sat in courtroom, judges who had voted for her condemnation, guards who had watched her cell, notaries who had recorded proceedings, soldiers who had been assigned to her custody. They testified under oath before the Pope's representative, and they told the truth. They testified that Joan's confession had been manipulated, that the document she actually signed bore little resemblance to what was entered into the official record, that her imprisonment violated church law, that the guards had been routinely abusive, that her dress had been taken from her, forcing her into an impossible decision, that the entire trial had been corrupt from beginning to end. The rehabilitation court declared the original verdict a complete fraud. Joan's name was formally cleared. The church officially acknowledged her virtue, and within a century she was canonized as a saint. The English had burned a saint, and history confirmed it. But here's the part that should unsettle you in a way historical facts rarely do. Joan of Arc did not die because of weakness or spiritual collapse. She did not perish because she denied God or betrayed her calling. She died because she trusted the law. She died because she believed rules existed that would protect her. She died because she signed a document believing it would spare her life. And that document was a trap. The system that killed her was not chaotic or incompetent. It was perfectly engineered. It had layers of safeguards. When theology failed, when rhetoric couldn't break her, it had a contingency. It created a situation where being human seeking safety, fearing assault, trying to survive became evidence of guilt. Her fear itself was turned into a weapon. And this is where the story stops being medieval. We see this structure everywhere today. It is not always fire. It is not always a scaffold in a town square, but the framework is the same. Forced confessions used against the accused. Legal snares where telling the truth becomes proof of guilt. Systems designed so there is no winning outcome. Where self-defense is framed as aggression. Where asking for protection is treated as wrongdoing. Where transparency itself becomes incrimination. Joan of Arc did not die because she was weak or mistaken. She died because she was caught inside a legal machine built specifically to destroy her, and there was no escape. She signed the paper because she wanted to live, and that desire for life was converted into proof of her guilt. That is the echo of 1431. That should terrify you. You have just heard a truth history tried to bury the story of a girl who saved a kingdom and was destroyed by the very system meant to protect truth. If you believe history matters, if you believe these stories deserve to be told fully and honestly, subscribe to the Forgotten Tortures, because the truth does not need to remain buried.